Neil. Good to see you today, sir.
Good to see you too, brother. Thank you so much for being here, man. It's all yours.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Getting started here Saturday morning, Portal to Ascension, making some magic happen. Today, I'm going to be taking you guys on a little bit of a journey to the heart of spiritual development and to the basic unfolding of energy and geometry within the universe. So we're going to go into the essence of what ascension is actually all about, because there's a lot of definitions for it, and we could take the one that we're all looking forward to, which is the ascension of humanity to the stars and the exploration of other worlds. We can look at it as the ascension of the self, of getting above the parts of ourselves that we are challenged by, that we struggle with, the shadows that we get entangled with, and moving into a higher field of consciousness where traumas and pain can be resolved. We can also look at ascension as a process of geometric evolution, where we actually gain greater insight through developing the complexities of our consciousness around a certain topic. We experience this a lot when we're with a group of people or a group of friends, and we start to look at things from multiple perspectives at the same time and work to integrate those in our beings. But regardless of how you want to look at ascension, the way that I'm going to be presenting it today is going to teach us a lot about how consciousness expands and contracts, and that there are different moments in time when we both need that expansion and we need to choose that contraction. That ascension and descension are two sides of the same coin, that we may evolve our beings and raise our vibrations and sort of vibrate out of the fields of materia, the gross world, to experience the etheric, the astral, the causal realms, akashic realms. But that also the process of incarnation is about getting deeper into ourselves. And sometimes that means coming down from the astral through the etheric and into the physical in order to engage with our lives more deeply. If we're always going out, we're not always going to get all the information we need by going in. So in this journey, we're going to talk about the basic process of the way that consciousness ascends, unfolds, and comes into states of self-realization, and also how fractally and holographically, as we move through those stages of development, we also see a returning down to a harmonic of lower states of consciousness in order to bring the higher states that we reach down and through into our lives and into the moments of our experience. So without further ado, I'm going to drop us into a screen share and we're going to get going on this magic. All right, here we go. So this particular talk I'm going to give today is an adaptation of my unified harmonic matrix talk, which some of you may have experienced. It's on YouTube. It's available to watch. This is an entirely different presentation though. And it's going to come at everything from an entirely different angle. So if you watch this presentation and you really like it, you really love it, jump on my YouTube channel and watch the main unified harmonic matrix presentation that I did at Contact in the Desert a couple of years ago. And I think you'll love it. It's a much deeper dive into the physics portions of this, as well as to specific parts in regards to the fractal holographic matrix inside of the body. But for our talk today, we're going to be focused on something that I like to call the ray of creation. The ray of creation is the sort of mirror of the unfolding essence of the universe itself. Say we looked at the Big Bang and we wanted to know exactly what happened. How did we get from there to here? And And the mirror of that sort of universal development and expansion is also the same process that we go through internally as we grow and evolve. And you're going to see a lot of synergies with moments of discovery, with moments of relationship. There's connections in this to practically every part of our lives. So to begin, we drop into the stillness. We drop into what we call the void, the 0 point, the pregnant womb of creation, the great mother, as some traditions would say, the divine feminine, the blackness pregnant with the future. And from that void, from that still place of nothing that somehow encircles everything, one emerges. The circle becomes a wholeness, and we experience the everything. That before creation, that which is both the body of the nothing and the impregnated source codex seed of creation, which is the masculine. This would be God, if you could use such a word. And yet this state, this being, this infinite eternal oneness, the same as the infinite eternal void or nothingness, is in a sense both the nothing and the everything, just as the void already contains the seed before that seed ever gestates and sprouts. And yet this is before time. This is before we move. This is just the identification of that which is. And what happens next? There's a breath, there is time, there is movement. We go from one place to another. The first moment of the universe occurs, and now there's a differentiation between the moment that is and the moment that was. And this is the first step of understanding duality, the first step of understanding the binary field of force that makes up this universe. Because as soon as there's a before and an after, there's a this and there's a that. And if we're looking at the universe expanding, we're talking about the hot and the cold, right? The light and the dark. And so in this separation, in this duality, there is polarity, and yet it is still contained within the wholeness, within the unity. In other words, the unity, the infinite, still encompasses it. The eternity still encompasses it. It has both the void within it and the totality of being connected to it. We can also see this as charge, positive and negative charge, or two directions of spin. But in the universal unfolding, it's easiest to see it as the breakdown of heat and cold and the differentiation between the two, because as you have this node expanding, you now have areas of the universe that are hotter and are colder. And that heat and cold within this sort of fluid, super fluid, gaseous flow of energy of atoms becoming molecules, whether they're hotter or colder is going to determine a lot about what happens with them, because the cooling is going to start condensing while the heat is still expanding. And this creates the first alchemical dynamic of the universe. This is the mix of fire and water. And fire and water together alchemize and create more. We can see that between the fire and the water, between the hot and the cold, there's always going to be a still point. There's always a place that's right in the middle between the heat and the cold. There's always a place that's right in between the positive and the negative charge of a magnet. And that place we call the 0 point. And often those that are interested in during this conference, you'll hear things about 0 point energy. And to understand what that is really just to understand this very simple concept that there is a place between charge. There's a place in the middle between the positive and the negative. And within that place, new energy arises. It's where we see a lot of the quantum vacuum fluctuations pop out. And we can look at it as its own spot of energy, its own form of energy, its own element. Because when we mix fire and water together, steam comes out. It becomes a new form of energy. The water becomes air. The fire, alchemized with that water, heats the air, and they become a new thing. And this new thing, this wind that occurs, we can understand as the balance point. If we look at the formation of the protons in the beginning of the universe as positive charge, the sort of curvature of space-time forming something, right? The condensation of space itself to form matter. And we look at the spin on the field of that matter, the torsion of that, moving this field of electrons around it, which is the negative charge that we measure. Well, as that complexity grows and increases, we have to balance that out. And so how does it balance it out? Well, in my physics work, it's balanced out by conservation of spin in protons bonding with each other. And we call that conservation of spin within the nucleus of an atom. We've been referring to that as a neutron, as a separate thing. But is the air really separate? No, the air's in the fire and the air's in the water, right? It's in some underlying medium that already exists. I mean, what is a proton made of, after all? What is an electron made of? Is this a fundamental thing? Or are these things bundles of an underlying field of energy, the ether that encompasses them, that holds the space for them, that is the space in which they arise, the space-time, as Einstein would say. And if we look at this trinity, this positive, this negative, and this balance, we know we're not really complete, because even then, you now have the capacity to create more. As protons are able to bond and share energy with each other, conserving spin, creating a balanced state, they're able to then draw more electromagnetic energy, bond together in molecules, and voila, you begin to develop molecular structures, which is a higher form of matter, a transcendent. Each time we take a step here, there's both an encompassing that is going on, the original field of space, the ether that's holding, and an alchemical dynamic that's causing growth and evolution. So here now we have this quaternity, and quaternity is a very interesting geometry because spatially, we are now exiting that field of just a line or a plane that a triangulation creates, and now actually creating a tetrahedral space. We're creating a different dimension of energy each time we go up, and each one of those dimensions of energy reflects an aspect of who and what we are and how consciousness works within the universe. We can split it out, as the Native Americans have done, and look at that as the four directions. We are standing on the surface of the earth, and we have each of the directions around us. We can look at it as the elementals, as we have fire and water and air, and now together, those concrete and form earth. You know, protons and neutrons, as we call them, and electrons form molecular structures. The fields of different kinds of elements evolve in the gestation of the alchemy of the stars as hot and cold combine, and in supernovae, planets begin to be born. And these planets that form around stars are absolutely exquisitely amazing because they have the capacity to hold the field for all four of these elements to exist and be fully expressed in their essence. We can have the raging fires that clear the forests. We have the rainfall and the rivers and the oceans, which give birth to life through heat and cold. We have the air that becomes breathable by different kinds of life, and the solidity of the atomic structures forming the ground beneath our feet and the gravitational field that we need to live. And the indigenous peoples of our world have known this for a long time, that this balance of elements, that this state of being on a planet is sacred, and that you are in the center of this wheel that connects you to the sphere of the planet, that connects you to the essence of space-time and to the elementals by which space-time has arisen. And we can modify this, look at it like a square. We can look at it in a variety of formats, but this is, again, another point where there is a seed of creation occurring that can give rise to something new. And what is that new thing? What is it that comes out of the ability for elements to combine on a planet? Well, it is the experience of those elements. It is the experience of what fire and water and air and earth are. We transcend them, we ascend above them in order to understand them and to engage them. And this symbol is one that we find all over in other indigenous traditions around the earth. This is the symbol of the pentagram, where the fire, the air, the earth, and the water, and the spirit, the ether, that which contains them, the consciousness which perceives them, is recognized as a part of the tension and the dynamic with the other elements. This symbol is found in many, many different cultures. And although it can be sometimes translated in slightly different ways, as long as there is a transcendent and four equal lower planar fields, we're talking about the same symbolism, which is the relationship between our consciousness and spirit being and the physical world around us. This is, in essence, the vibrational field necessary for the complexity of consciousness to develop the root chakra, the appearance and experience of the physical world from a consciousness state. The root chakra or chakra mediates the relationship within our bodies to these elements, because there's also a balance within us which requires a certain amount of heat, a certain amount of cold and water, a certain amount of solidity, bone and tissue, a certain amount of breath, respiration. And each of these things are required to be in balance with each other, along with our consciousness penetrating and expressing itself through our form for our physical experience to be able to happen. And from this same geometry, we will derive the geometry of gravitation itself. For in my journey through this ray of creation as a teenager, I began to realize that these geometries are not just sacred symbols from the ancient past and from cultures around the world, but they are, in fact, the geometries of how space-time works and operates. Because there's something very special to this five-pointed star. It actually allows curvature of a plane when you're dealing with equilateral triangles. Are we looking at a flat pentagram right now, pentagon with five triangles? Or are we looking at a pyramid where there's actually equilateral triangles forming a curved surface? These are the questions that Buckminster Fuller asked as he began to develop the geodesic dome. And in my realizations, it came to pass that I found that if the fabric of space-time itself is a highly tensegral lattice of energy, then this, in fact, is the geometry that enables curvature of space-time, or as Einstein would say, gravitation. But it's not where we stop. It's really where we start, because from this point, we have to continue to evolve. We've now been able to perceive the elements of our physical experience. But what happens when we transcend our physical experience? What happens when we go above the field of the elementals and the self that is just perceiving the physical as all that exists. This is where we enter the field of what I like to call emotionality. The 6-petal lotus is the sacral chakra, and we can look at that as a field and spectrum of elementals, just the same as the physical. So the red of the fire still exists, the yellow of wind, the green of earth, the blue of water, the purple of spirit. But now something new is being born. Something is being birthed out of this, and that birthing is life force energy. That birthing is the experience of life itself as part of the process. So that 5-pointed star that we witness becomes our experience of life and what is living and what is coming into incarnation as material. And we now, moving with the ether, moving with the transcendent at every moment as we grow and evolve, now can perceive life as one of the key elements of creation. And from this place and perspective, we can also begin to see the balance between different elementals of energy, the balance between the fire and the earth, the red and the green, the balance between the water and the life force, and how they interoperate and how they require each other, the balance between the air and the spirit, and the connection between breath and spirit. We also see the symbolism of this geometry in many other cultures and religions, whether it's called the Star of Bethlehem or the Star of David or the Merkabah or 1,000 other names. This symbol of the hexagram, this geometry, forms a lasting, permanent field of impression in the consciousness of our world and the people upon it. This geometry is very special because it forms a kind of equilibrium state. It returns us to the plane in which everything is equal and all things have superfluid transmittability. It allows the ground state for energy to be expressed. And if we look at this in terms of simple equilateral triangles, the equilateral triangle being the most balanced energetic form on a plane, or tetrahedron if you make it 3-dimensionally, you can see that all the equilateral triangles form perfect balance. And what we have here is actually the geometry of the flower of life and the geometry that makes up open planes of space. This is the ground state of the fabric of space-time, which allows the greatest movement of energy to flow through it. Energy in motion is emotion. And so this geometry within our sacral chakra, within our body, actually helps us to create the space for us to feel energy in its different forms. Feeling energy is all that emotion really is. And when we're stuck in certain emotions, it's because we're not actually allowing the energy to flow. We're caught in the feeling of a single part of that vibration. We're not allowing it to continue moving and expanding. When you really let your emotions flow, think about when you break down crying and you're fully having a meltdown. When you absolutely let it go and you fully let yourself cry, it's funny because sometimes from that place, you end up laughing. And from the deepest grief, you go to this strange fire of joy. It's as if the depth of emotion is all interconnected and expands the more we allow ourselves to feel all of its alchemy and its dynamics. And yet from here, we don't stop. We rise above our emotions at times. We begin to perceive that the cycles and circuits of feeling move and change and go on, that there's always a dance, and that our ability to perceive that dance is our mind. Our mind, our solar gate, is able to perceive the lunar cycles of the moon around our earth of body. Our root earth chakra, our lunar chakra, our solar chakra. And that solar chakra is now saying, I can perceive all the different vibrations for what they are. I can perceive different emotions for what they are, different energies for what they are. And that I am and I can perceive is like the white light in the center of the vibrational lotus of the 6 colors. And that white light emerges out and is able to now be part of that circuit, to see the red fire, but also know it as the emotion of passion, to feel and experience and know that orange, ripe life force, but also know it as inspiration, to perceive the wind and the power of wind directing and changing and moving, and the power of breath to move and change, and experiencing that as intention, to knowing the earth, the connection, the concrescence of force, the crystallization of things and the becoming of things, and experience that as creation and appreciation, to witness the flows of water and the ways that they connect the waterways of the earth, always moving towards the ocean, the water cycles, and realize that we're looking at the patterns of relation and communication. And witnessing the flow of spirit itself, seeing the ether move, seeing that we are able to see our own consciousness expressed within us and outside of us. And we have this great realization. And so from this place of the mind, we are able to begin moving beyond the elements and moving into a state which is the driving impulse for creation within the universe, where we're choosing to be a creator. We're not just receiving all of the elements being given to us to experience our bodies. We're not just feeling the flows of the energies within the universe, but we're beginning to take command as wizards, standing and holding space above the field. And the geometry of this is the 7. The 7 is often referred to as the Virgin star or the Elven star. And there's not a coincidence why there's 7 saints and 7 levels of heaven and 7 chakras and many, many, many other points where we find 7 used as this place of a sort of transcendent that goes beyond the existing structures. And geometrically, the 7 literally stretches beyond the boundaries of rationality in the sense of the angles between the points. It's nearly impossible to draw a perfect 7-pointed star. In fact, even rendering it on a computer is never going to be exact because the angle between each of the points is an irrational number. And there's a lot of magic to that. But I will say that if we look at the geometry of the 7, we realize that you can no longer fit equilateral triangles into this geometry. You can't squeeze these, no matter how you angle this thing. If you look at it like a pyramid, if you look at it like depth, you're literally no longer able to make each of these triangles equilateral. It's impossible. And so because of that, what we're actually looking at is a geometry that's literally warping space or turning space, causing the fabric of space-time to move. It must grow, it must spin, it must radiate, it must create. This is the nature of mind in its expression of consciousness. It changes the fabric and flow of space-time itself. And as we perceive with our minds, we begin to become capable of not only perceiving our mind and our being in the moment, but we are able to witness our own mind in the past. And this is the perception of time. To be able to see that we were a moment ago and we are here now is a further extension of the mind. We move this geometry to the eightfold lattice to acknowledge this, because as we acknowledge that we have this beautiful rainbow of light and white light, we have to also acknowledge that there's also this darkness, this mystery. And that void is always going to be there. And the dynamic of our consciousness is to both perceive what is and to also sometimes not perceive what is, to forget, to lose sense of what was. There is this deep well of mystery in our past, both the moments that we can acknowledge and see and witness as they move through time, as well as this depth of what came before that, what came before that. And as we explore the pool of the mystery of our own journey through time and expand our consciousness within our lives and the moments of our childhood and growing up, so do we also begin to unlock awareness and patterns that existed before we were in this incarnation. We began to see that there is a pattern and light hidden in the darkness, that the black is not black, that the void is not empty, but that in fact that pregnant womb of creation, that space of mystery, that place where we forgot, that place within ourselves that's hidden behind the veil, was hidden for a reason, so that we could rediscover it again and evolve who we are. Our perception of time has been well articulated by the I Ching. And as you can see here, the elements of the I Ching perfectly fit and align with the elemental evolutionary structure that we've been discussing, where fire is fire, the element of wood or life force is lake, because under the surface of a lake, there is all of this life moving, though the surface may seem still. The energy of the wind, of breath. If we jump over to the green, we have the mountain, which is the representation of earth in other traditions. The solidification, the crystallization, the formation of firm structure. We have water, which is always water. And of course, spirit, but is translated in the I Ching as thunder, which can also literally be translated as inspiration, and is often translated to the term satori, which is instantaneous realization. And the axis that all of this vibrations move on is heaven and earth, as they say in the I Ching, but which are truly yang and yin, the infinite yang and the infinite yin. Just as fire may be more yang than yin, it's got two solid bars and a broken bar, and water may be more yin than yang. It's got one solid bar for yang and two broken bars for yin. And you can see literally in the symbolism, the energies that are being expressed there. Fire is very yin on the inside. You can stick your hand right through it. You can just slice right through fire. And yet on the outside, it's releasing all of this heat, this yang, this power that can cook and burn and transform and transmute. Water on the inside is very hard. You can't just slice through a bunch of water. I mean, if you're a surfer, you know what I mean. There's a serious amount of impact when you push your way under a wave and through it. It's thick and powerful. Water is so powerful that it tears down mountains. It carves canyons. And yet on the outside, water is very soft. Water is very yin. It takes the form of whatever object you pour it into. It will change, it will move, it'll be dynamic always. And each of these symbols, you can actually see the energy of the elements. In the purple thunder, you can actually see the energy of the ground and the space that the lightning comes down and strikes from the heavens to hit that ground. In its opposite, the wind, you can see the ground being the yin space. Imagine a field of wheat, and you have this roaring wind passing over it, pressing it, moving it, changing it. If we look at lake, the orange, we can see the surface of the lake is sort of this clear reflecting gate, this yin space, shining, reflecting the sunlight, letting light pass through. And under the surface of the lake, you have all of these fish and life and weeds and algae growing and changing and moving. And if we look over at mountain, which is its opposite, we can see the dynamic of the mountain, the yin inside, the deep silence inside the mountain. And yet on the top, on the ground, on the surface of that mountain, you have trees and plants and animals and life and rivers and all the things moving. And so hidden in the structure of simply yang and yin are the codices that connect to each of those elemental developments back from the beginning of time, which is why I bring this to the surface. And we can leverage this to understand actually how we're moving and changing and shifting in time in each moment. The I Ching is fundamentally binary code, which is the foundation of our computing systems. Considering what we are capable of encoding through its structure, it's easier to understand the computation power of the universe and of consciousness itself. If we break it down, we can look at this field of time and our experience of time as literally the vibrational wheel of the six, where we're moving between different feelings, different vibrations, different elements. We're experiencing a lot of different things, but we're doing that in an axis of past and future. And so when we're perceiving this sort of eighth point, we're the solar light of the mind, witnessing the moments of change, going all the way into the past, identifying the state of how we felt physically, what we experienced emotionally, and experiencing what we were thinking and what was in our minds in each one of those moments going into the past. But from here, we began to also see that we can project into the future. In the same way that we receive the yin of the past, receiving every moment that's ever happened. And in fact, that's all we really can do is change how we accept what has already happened. You can't go back and change something that you did yesterday. If you wrecked your car, you wrecked your car. If this happened or that happened, you're not going to change it, but you can change how well you accept it. And that brings in that energy of the past to the present, which gives you more power in how you're able to perceive the choice you're able to make now. If you wreck your car yesterday, but you don't accept that that happens, then today you might think you can go jump in your car and drive it just like normal. Sometimes this happens to us when we have like a major incident occur in our lives. We lose a loved one, we lose an animal or a pet or a friend, or we go through a big life change like this. We wake up and maybe the first thought that we have is like, oh, I want to go pet that dog, because we love that dog or that cat. And they're not there because some part of us hasn't yet fully accepted the transition, the death, the loss, the thing that's happened. And so we literally are in a place where we're lost in terms of the choice that we make. But when we've fully accepted the pain that we've been through, the alchemical changes that certain kinds of painful experiences in our lives brought to us, the changes that trauma has actually given us as a gift so that we could grow, so that we could see, so that we could be more compassionate to others and understand others. The more we accept those things, the more powerful our span of choice going into the future, the more clearly we can see how to navigate. especially if we're dealing with somebody else that may have trauma patterns, especially if we're dealing with somebody else who just lost an animal who's a loved one, or somebody else who is experiencing, something horrible happening in their lives. We can actually choose to relate with them in a deeper and more profound way the more we have accepted our own journey from the past to the present. And this leads to a perception of ourselves, a true awareness of who we are. And who we are is not just the now. The now is the encompassing of the past of who we've been and the future of what we will be. The perception of who we are is the flow of time itself. This is the 10, the wholeness, where the self is able to accept that 8, infinite past, infinity symbol, and that 9, spiral of creation into the future, and generate the 1 and the nothing, the everything that we are and the nothing that we are, all that we are, all that we have yet to be, the mystery and the wholeness of ourself. And this allows us to see others, to truly perceive others, because we are one with ourselves. And now we can see that others are also one, that they are a being that has journeyed in time, that has a past, that has accepted or not much of their past, and that has a choice right now. This gate of perceiving the other is key because it also unlocks the ability to perceive others in time. It lets us witness people going through change and to relate to them going through change as ourselves, just like we go through change. And this is the heart. This is where the heart chakra fully opens and unlocks, is the ability to actually be in relativity to another as you, to feel someone else's emotions as yours, which we do, to relate to the experience of another as yourself. And this is where we experience love. This is where we truly experience the connectivity of being with others. And from here, we begin to evolve. We begin to recognize that we grow because of other people. We're not alone in this universe for a reason. We develop, we move, we express, we change. And every one of those changes is perfect and beautiful. We begin to see the sort of center point of the heart, that there's this dynamic of changes that's occurring, but there's also this stillness place, this place where we're already there. We've already got it. We're already one. We're already unified. And it's important to acknowledge that place, because it's from the place of recognizing that we're unified that we can also start to become very curious about what it is that's different. Because while we can feel in our heart others and ourselves, we know that maybe we don't feel everything that somebody else feels. Maybe we can't exactly perceive it the way they perceive it because their particular blockchain is different from ours. Their lineage of memory, their DNA of experience is different from ours. And it will always be different from ours. It will never be exactly the same. And that differentiation is an evolution of the heart. It's the moving of the heart towards the throat chakra, where we begin to realize that we create ourselves in every moment, but we're also creating, in a sense, our perception of other people. We're actually framing them in a certain way and in a certain light. And the problem that often occurs arises when someone believes that, well, we're just all one, dude. So you must behave the exact same way that I do. You're going to do the exact same thing as me because I know the right thing to do because of my experience. But this is a problem because other people have different experience. So they're coming from a different place and a different perception, and they're acting from different impulses and different ideas of what is true. And if we acknowledge this, if we can see that, then we can create enough space within us to both acknowledge that we love them, we relate with them, we're feeling some of what they're feeling, but we're not knowing or experiencing everything that they're feeling. And that means we need to communicate. That means we need to actually have an experience in time in which we are in an exchange with each other. And this communicability gives us the power to be in physical relationship with each other and have a dynamic change that we go through with each other, just like the whole universe did in getting to know all of its parts. There's a reason why fire and water separate. There's a reason why they create air. There's a reason why those are distinct from earth. There's a reason why each direction is a different direction, because each direction, each movement in the universe gives rise to a different facet of consciousness experiencing itself. It gives rise to evolution of being. And so we can begin to see that as the heart evolves, we're actually re-entering the physiological dance of the root chakra to be able to experience my heartbeat and your heartbeat as different things, and your particular expression of consciousness and mine as different things. And that there's still this transcendent, there's this trinity, there's something that connects us both. And it's always there. It's the part where we've already met. It's the part where we've already worked out the challenge. We've already got the imprint of the solution. It's already evolving itself right before our eyes. And yet we are different as much as we are the same. And so we experience this on the planet as the evolution of language. We're built to experience communion with others, both through understanding the dynamics of what others are saying and what others are communicating and where they're coming from and the culture they're coming from, as well as the part of us that realizes sometimes we don't understand. We don't always know what somebody is saying. We don't always get it, whether that's through physical communication or verbal or whatever. There's a place of mystery that we literally always have in the field of communication, but we do our best to take the gift that I can have my experience, you can have your experience, and we have ours together. And you can see here in that geometry, the trinity of each of the elements. I've got my fire, you've got your fire, and there's a fire that connects and unifies us. Wind, 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 earth, 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 water, 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 spirit, 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 the flow of experience of being. Communication is something that we experience that comes into us from the past, where we receive this flow of experience and we evolve the dynamics of how we relate to our choice in the moment in order to express a new dynamic into the future. So it's a gateway point between the past and the future. It's an integration period where data and information from the past is evolving, reunifying, and moving forward. In the unified harmonic matrix, I talk about it as literally the stage where DNA forms chromosomes, where DNA packages itself up enough to be able to split itself in half as a chromosome and recreate itself. We replicate ourselves through communication. We take what we have and what we've got and we give it to others to be able to experience. Now, somewhere in the still point between that field of the past and that creation in the future is this Om, this place in the middle of the mystery, this space of silence at the core of the throat chakra that's not silence, but actually the sound of creation itself. It is the Om. And the reason that the 16-petal lotus is used for the throat, just as the 12-petal lotus of the heart and the 10-petal lotus of the solar plexus of the self completing itself, understanding, to the 6 of the sacral, to the 5, to the 4 of the root, which becomes 5. That 4 becomes 5, that 5 becomes 6, that 6 becomes 7, the 7 evolves to 10, the 10 becomes 11 to self and other, the self and the other is 12, the 12 has a 13th point, awakening, spreading into 14 as we differentiate and recognize distinctiveness, into 15 of expressing and communicating, and finally to 16, the point of the Om, where all communication is recognized as being, again, part of one thing, where all the languages become one. This is where the language of telepathy arises, and it's where we begin to transcend language itself, because we start communicating not just through physical cues, expressions of words, but we begin to communicate through emotion. We begin to realize that vibration underlies our communication. And so we're exchanging emotion and trying to relate that emotion down to our own physical experience of self. And this continues to mature until we realize that it's all emotion. It's all energy in motion. And all energy in motion has the experience of the individual self experiencing emotion, the other that is experiencing its emotion, and the vibrational emotion that transcends the two and connects the two. And this 666 awakens the third eye. And the balance of this vibrational field is extraordinarily beautiful because it expresses the yin, the yang, and the balance between the two. There's always a trine, and it incorporates life and life force into it. It acknowledges that life has more than just the actions that we take. It's a living, breathing, flowing force and field, that we are in fact these breathing forces of energy in time and creation. And there's an immense power that comes with this acceptance. And in the Hindu tradition, the chakra of the third eye is the 2-petal lotus. So you've been maybe wondering, why is this 18? We're supposed to be talking about 2, right? Well, the 2 petals are 9 and 9. It's the spirals of existence, represented also in 6 and 9 in the form of the symbol of Cancer, also represented in the symbol of the yin yang, which is a 9 and a 9 connecting together. This is the ability to perceive duality at a higher level. And when you actually understand that the dynamic of the infinite yin and the infinite yang are trinities, now you begin to unlock the color codex of the vibrational field of experience, which is our spirituality. It is our self-perceiving self and perceiving other and perceiving our connection. And from this place, we awaken the state of higher will, this unification of the ability to see self, see other, see all that is, and actually create from there, to know that we have a choice, that we're in a stream of a universal experience, but it doesn't just carry us along all the time. We actually get to choose. And the ability to perceive our choice as well as receive the flow of experience and time is the unlocking of the awareness of destiny, that we're going to somehow choose our pattern through time, and yet somehow, no matter what we choose and how we go about choosing it, it's already perfect. What the heck? How is it possible that all the things could happen and all the stuff goes on and we make all the choices and we make all these mistakes, and yet in our moments of greatest clarity and lucidity, in our moments of divine realization, in our moments of deep communion with Source, we recognize suddenly that every pattern, every mistake, every challenge, every issue, every pain, every trauma is part of a garden of flowers blooming into beauty. That in fact, the moments of darkness and pain that we've experienced were like seeds for greater expansion of consciousness. And we began to recognize that it is always that we are in a current of destiny, that we can't stop ourselves from evolving ourselves. No matter how hard we try, no matter how long we hold off and resist, we will always fall into the wormhole. We will always find ourselves merged back into the singularity and blowing through the other side, blooming like a white hole into the universe with more awareness of who and what and why we are. This is the gift, to be able to see with our mind the great seven, the mind of ourselves, the mind of the other, and the mind of the source, the mind that somehow transcends and includes and incorporates that which braids the field of all consciousness together, that all of it somehow is interconnected, unified, and arranged in this perfect, beautiful pattern of existence. A pattern that is continuously opening and evolving and changing. And this is the awakening of our crown. The crown that is fully open when we have this direct experience of being the complete and ever-present bridge between God, source, the self, and other. We might translate this perception of infinity as being, perception of other being, and that being that is the infinite. We can see that the infinite encompasses the part, but the question is, are you infinite? And is another infinite? Can you and the other both be infinite, and there be an infinity that encompasses you both? Can you be infinitely differentiated as much as you are infinitely unified? This is the 21, the 777, and it gates and opens into and continues to evolve as a lattice of energy and time. The universe doesn't just stop. It doesn't just get to a certain geometry and go, oh, okay, I think that's probably enough. It keeps going, you know, from the 21 to the 24 to the 27 to the 33 to the on and on and on and on. And there are dynamics and gifts and keys of wisdom in each one of those numbers. Yet what I'm sharing with you today in this understanding of the ray of the creation is the ability to decode any number, any geometry, any field of consciousness, because all of them exist within the braid of this fundamental unfolding. And you can go back down. You can see how some things are very deeply related to the 5 and the pentagram. You can see that other things are much more related to the heart and the 12 and the relationships of 3 and 4 and 6 and 2 that make up 12, right? The numbers are just reflections of dynamic processes within the universe. This is how people are able to do things like read tarot cards or read playing cards, because all you're doing is using the archetypal pattern recognition of the flow of consciousness discovering itself as a mechanism to translate everything that's happening in the universe, because everything that's happening in the universe is consciousness discovering itself. That's you. That's you. This divine, beautiful, exquisite, infinite being discovering itself. And there's always more to discover. You think you got it all? Nope. There's more. You think you understand everything? No, here's a new person you haven't understood yet. And when you come to, at some point in time, the state in which you recognize that you have already got it and you've known it all, and it's the universe and it's God and it's all you and you already got it all figured out. Well, when you're there, you'll know that you have a choice. And the fact that you have a choice when you're there to either dissolve into the infinite eternal, to either become that state of non-individuation and hold that state, or to return to the individuation state and bring as much of that non-individuated state as possible, it's your choice. You'll always have it. And I can tell you also that many people think they get there because they get to a point where they realize they're connected, they're one, or they have superpowers. You know, they got metaphysical skills. They can do some cool shit, right? And so they think, I am the power of all that is. And they get caught up in and wound up in, you know, complexes. And we have names for those. It's called the Messiah complex. And it's a big deal because it's not that we ever want to shame someone for realizing that they're God, right? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with realizing that you're the source. But if you think that you're the only one and that you're the one who's supposed to do it all, then you've forgotten the other. And you're actually just operating from a distorted solar plexus state, because the solar plexus can absolutely experience the self as the infinite. It's the infinite virgin star. It's the seven. It has the ability to see all of it. It's got the ability to get all of it, but it can't really see the other as the self fully and deeply. And so the distortion of things like Messiah complex come from the misapplication of the rise of Kundalini and the awakening of certain centers and the lack of integration back down into lower centers. Once the self is able to perceive that the self and the other are both infinite as well as source, and that all three coexist, and that we are in a space of Trinity that's also a unity, that's also a void, that we have a divine masculine and we have a divine feminine, and we also just have the divine, and that they're the same thing, and that they're also differentiated. And once you get those paradoxes, once you experience the essence of that, it's kind of hard to get totally wrapped up in yourself, because you realize you don't got it all because you're here. You don't have it all because you literally are walking on a ground. You're talking to other people. And even if you ascend to your etheric state and your astral body and you learn how to travel in your astral body, you'll realize there's other astral bodies. When you get to the causal plant template, you realize, oh, well, we're all coming from cause and effect, and there's a reason and force of creation and everything. And you get to the Akashic and you're like, oh, wow, okay, I get it. Like, everything's recorded, everything's part of time, everything's part of space. It's all this language, it's all this giant library of creation. And then you get to this higher plane where you see all the patterns of existence, what some people call the spiritual plane. And you think, oh my God, that's it. It's all numbers and patterns and it's all a matrix and I've got it figured out. And dang, I'm really good. And so are all these other people here. And then still, as long as you hold on to that idea that you got it and you're really good, you're still limited in that place. And there's a surrender to occur. And the surrender is this sort of celestial unlocking that moves us through the crown, that moves us into the seventh heaven, that moves us into the higher planes of existence, where we literally, really, truly start to surrender our hold on things and we begin to trust everything. We begin to allow the beauty of the divine creation to unfold. We start to feel acceptance for all the things and all the people in all the moments. We start to actually open ourselves and our souls to the divine love, and we begin to experience ourselves as divine love. and you might be in it for a while and you might fall out of it, and that's okay too. That's okay too, because it's a journey, and you're not supposed to just be stuck in one place or another. You're supposed to experience all of you. So I think I'm coming to the end of my time here. I'll just put a few more pieces of information in your minds, which is, that chakras really are this interface in our bodies, a vortex that allows us to interface with the fabric of space-time through geometric resonance. And there's quite a lot of great scientific backing for the chakras. Barbara Ann Brennan is probably my favorite researcher in the space. She was a NASA astrophysicist who was studying the effects of space and interstellar travel on the human body. And in doing so, she realized there's these 7 distinct layers to the vibrational electromagnetic field of the body. And she was taking yoga at the time and goes, oh my God, maybe they're onto something with this 7 chakra thing. She ends up starting to develop the ability to see energy around bodies, which any of you can do. And I highly recommend the practice of developing your energetic sensitivity and capacity to perceive energy, and founds an entire healing school based on one simple premise that all illness is simply energy that is contracted or constricted or resisted within ourselves. And if we can simply move the energy where it's stuck, we can heal anything. It's extraordinarily powerful work. It's changed my life. I no longer experience illness and sickness like most people do. I tend to discover symptoms very quickly when I have them. I identify which chakra and where in my body that system is engaging with myself, and I begin to actively co-work with my body to actually move that energy and heal myself. We can also look at the chakras as scale and frequency. We can see that every structure in the universe, from atomic nuclei up to planets, up to star systems and galaxies, are all different wavelengths of frequency. They're all different vibrations. Everything is a geometry and everything is vibrational. And here we are in the mix of it all. And we can look at experience itself as sort of a dance through these harmonic ripples of light, like an interaction with the song, an interaction with the field of light that is the universe itself. And we can see, as we break light down, we break spectra down, we can start to see relationships that, in fact, it is true that every object and everything that is created takes on one or another form of vibration, takes on one or another part of the spectrum, and that there's octaves to it, just like music. So if we look on Walter Russell's elements here on the left, you can see that every element forms an interaction point in this sort of ongoing spectrum of octaves. If you look on the right, this is Nick Fiorenza's work, who's done some amazing stuff in looking at music scales and earth resonance and color correspondences, to be able to see that, in fact, everything from the circumference of the planet to the Earth's rotation and diameter, to the Pythagorean resonances, all occur at different harmonic resonance fields. My colleague and very close friend, Robert Grant, has also done a bunch of brilliant work in this space, showing interconnections with different frequencies, correcting Pythagorean tuning, and also extending some of the patterns in mathematics and geometry to understanding relationships between planetary scales and numbers in their root form and frequency. And if we're getting down to the physics of all of this, we got to understand that light frequencies are just really ripples of the fabric of space-time itself, that space-time is light. And that PSU, in this case, Planck spherical units, are actually this interbraided structure that's forming the lattice of space, and light is the oscillation of that structure in space-time itself. Now, when that structure of space-time moves, that's electrons moving. It's experienced as a field of charge that is moving. But when we're just looking at light and how it's moving and bouncing off of things and refracting off of everything, we're literally just looking at that oscillation of the field. And so I'll round off the end of my talk here by just bringing us back to an understanding that these simple patterns that we've talked about, this journey through the universe, is literally the fundamental patterning that we can use to understand the core of physics and actually unify physics. Of course, it takes an understanding of how consciousness works to unify physics. You're not just going to get it from the perception of the other, from the perception of what is outside. Have to unify the perception of the outside with what's inside, how you perceive, along with that which connects the two. And when you do that, you see that the pentagram and the forces that create the matter of the universe itself, the root chakra, experiencing that matter, that is all the energy of gravitation. You're in a body, it's held together by protons. Those protons have gravitational fields. It's literally the gravity that's holding those protons together. They're in a dynamic with each other, and you're held onto the planet through the gravitational curvature, the flow of space-time headed towards this planet. And the planet survives because of its gravity in the gravitational well of the sun. And the sun holding the earth enables us to have this relationship with the sun that gives life to the earth. The moon is held in the relationship with the earth in order to balance our emotional field. And so that piece of gravity is critical. And of course, the sun is held in the galactic field, and the galaxy is held in Laniakea. And Laniakea is held in a larger universal gravitational structure. Gravity connects us and unifies us and makes the experience of the physical world possible. Electromagnetic energy flows through the universe because of equilibrium, because of equilateral triangulation, whether that's in a pentagonal curvature structure or the flat sort of structures of tetrahedral matrices, etc. And so feeling moves, feeling evolves, and feeling changes because we have this incredible universe that is in such a beautiful state of balance and near equilibrium. Now, of course, because of gravity and curvature, it's always a little bit out of equilibrium, just a tiny bit. And that tiny bit gives the potential for change, experience, and creation to occur. And it's also because as gravitation occurs, there's also turning and spin, and that spin creates radiation, and that is the mind or the self expressing itself, changing the universe around us. We can look at the field of the rotational energy moving through space and making all the change happen as the seven. So inherently here, we have the body, the emotions, and the mind. And each of these very simple geometries, from the point, the unity, the void, to the two of the Vesica Pisces or Piscis, to the three, the triangle, to the four of the square, to the five of the pentagram, to the six of the hexagram, the seven of the heptagram. If you're trying to get into higher geometries, they're right there. They're nested inside of that. 8 is 2 4s, 9 is 3 3s, 10 is 2 5s, 12 is 2 6s, 14 is 2 7s. And it continues unlocking that way all the way up to infinity. And this also can point us to the power of prime numbers, which we'll have to cover in another session. The power of prime numbers is sort of like the individuation points, which distinctively carry the boundary conditions between different sets of harmonics in relationship to each other. And from these keys, we have the power and the codex to understand the whole universe and begin to truly understand and unpack our relationship to the universe and what connects it with us. So thank you guys so much for your time today. Really appreciate you joining me. Thanks, Neil. And Hey,
Hey,
Alan, I see you there. Hey,
hey,
buddy.
Adam, I just have a question. Is there a relationship between the prime numbers and the Fibonacci series?
Yeah, there is actually. But I think I'm not probably the best person to ask about that one.
Oh,
That
okay.
would be a great question for Robert Grant if you have a chance to connect with him.
Okay.
And there is an inherent numerological sequence that exists that I will say, if you count from the 1 to the 144 in the Fibonacci sequence, that's the first 12 in the sequence steps, right?
Right.
Basically you go through a circuit of digital roots. And then if you go from the 1 to 144, and then you take it the next 12 steps and you map those around a 24 pointed circle. So you're going from 1 all the way around each of the digital root sequences in the first 24 steps of the Fibonacci sequence. What you find is that all of the primes squared end up in the first clock point of that 24, and all the other primes all either exist in 6-1 or 6+1 in each of the angles. So the 6th ray is going to be in the center here, and there's a ton of primes on the 5 ray, on the 7 ray. There's a ton of primes on the 11th ray and the 13th ray.
One question about the 5 and the 6 is like, it seems like the 5 and 6 are combined with time and the calendar itself. We have 12 months, but the 12th month is Deca, which is a 10, which is an aspect of 5. So within the human time flow system, there's a kind of mixing of the 5 and 6 energies. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, in fact, all of our measurement and our study throughout history has been based on the 5 and the 6, which is not really a mistake when you look at the fact that, all of our biological molecules occur from an interaction between a molecule that has 5 points and 6 points. But what I'm speaking to is literally our different systems of measurement. We have the imperial system and we have the metric system. And the imperial system is based on 6 or 12, right? And it's also related to the compass system, which is 60 based, right? And then you have the metric system, which is all based on 5 and 10, right? And what's really powerful and beautiful about that too is that it turns out that those two systems are part of course, some larger, older system that exists. Because it turns out, and this is Alan Green's work, that you can take basically within 6 feet, you get exactly a meter, a cubit, and a foot come together to equal exactly 6 feet. That is not a coincidence. I mean, the fact that 6 feet equals those things, I mean, come on.
Right. So even the inch feet system that seems very arbitrary was based on a science that has been forgotten.
That's right. That's right. And there's a
probably
reason why those
from Egypt, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, well, there's geometries that point to the mathematics of that system that are hidden in ancient structures like the Great Pyramid, just as much as there are geometries that point to the metric system, and there's geometries that point to the cubic system. It's as if all of them, they're obviously consciousness choosing to measure the universe, right? And so the sort of masters of the ancient past developed codices to translate the ways that the mind would see the universe. And so they're all embedded in structures like that. But yeah, Alan Green's work on the 5 and 6 is incredible.
Beautiful. We could talk about this forever because it is forever that's created this moment in time that you're kind of pulling it together. We're on the verge of a kind of breakthrough in geometry and consciousness and science and new propulsion. So thank you, Adam, for a brilliant
such a pleasure.
overview. Hope to talk to you again really soon.